We're letting you know we have a problem. But the depth of which we know of that problem, we don't know. And so any amount of communicating too soon doesn't help anyone. And I think oftentimes, like I said, we get the CISOs on the other side and they get so punchy and they get so aggressive and then they get talking really fast and technical. And it's like, we don't know what we don't know. And we're not going to sit here and guess with you because that introduces risk.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative, in conjunction with Cyber Reason, is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome DawnMaries Hutchinson, CISO at British American Tobacco.
Oh, well, it's great to be here with you, Todd. So it's a very funny story, actually. I was a political science major in college, and all that really means is I can articulate an argument well. I'm a strong writer, and so I was working as a technical writer at Independence Blue Cross when the HIPAA security rule was coming into fashion, and the person who was responsible for implementing the rule, leading that project, abruptly left the company, and my boss turned to me and said, "Do you think you could do it?" And I said, "Okay," and that's ultimately how I became an information security person, was entirely by happenstance and a lot of grit. I had to learn a lot very quickly.
And you've led security for several organizations as well as have been a consultant in the past as well.
That's right. So I led security at Urban Outfitters. That was really my first opportunity to become a security leader. And I keep saying that'll be the next book, Todd, is how to succeed at your first time security leadership role, because there's so much that I would do differently now, back then. But what's important about that kind of opportunity was I was a brand new CISO at the time of the Target breach. And so again, a bit like my HIPAA experience, I had to learn a lot very quickly. Not only about, credit card loss, but that was, there was just a wave. I mean, Target was the first domino, if you remember that year. And I had to learn very quickly even about how to respond to incidents. And so that was kind of where I got my feet wet there. And then I went on to Optiv, where I did a lot of virtual CISO work. And I feel like this is my favorite part of my career, because I would go into companies, sometimes just for a few hours, other times for several months, and really help them build a strategy and a plan and march to it. I think the modern CISO, particularly during this transformation kind of era, is always trying to pursue and get better. But the problem was we're always doing what we need to get done today, I think is like, if we look at the last couple of years, we're kind of constantly chasing the newest fire, and that strategy, that planning. I always use Wayne Gretzky's quote as "skate to where the puck will be," and I think that's the message for CISOs is, we're not trying to get to where we are today. We need to skate where the puck will be. Like, where's the company going, particularly in digital transformation? So that time leading companies through those kinds of strategic plans was some of the most exciting work I've ever done.
And that is so true. And the Target breach, it really did put us into the executive room. And you wrote a great piece for the CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges from Pioneers book. And the piece you wrote was, I love the title, Server Room to War Room, Enterprise Incident Response. And you start off by talking about how we have the CISO title on the business card, but don't really hold a big seat at the executive title. Instead, tolling away in the proverbial kitchens. So, tell us about that.
Well, I think it's interesting, and I say this a lot to CISOs: is you're the only one who sees the C. And oftentimes, even we're still saying, yes, your title is CISO, but your internal HR level is director, right? So we're still seeing some of those kind of awkward mismatches. But I felt like at the target breach was the first time we really elevated up, and we started talking at the executive level and really getting into the boardroom. And I think, flash forward, I guess I'm trying to think how long ago that was. So 2013. So it's almost been 10 years since that breach happened. And I would say that more and more now we're regular fixtures in the boardroom, and the C is starting to become more and more prominent. And not because we're accepting the responsibility for breaches, because I think that's an important distinction for everybody to understand. Is we lead technology risk management. We're telling you what the business risks, the technology risks to your business are, but we don't get to decide, how the big company, the enterprise, is going to invest and mitigate those risks. Like, how much are they willing to accept and how much are they not? I mean, ultimately we can't cut the company off from the internet, right? That's ultimate risk management. And so I feel like now we're getting to be like, we're business partners. We're helping them understand how much of their business can be lost in a data incident. And I think with a lot of these ransomware activities, that we're starting to get in the conscious minds now of everyone, as we're not just preventing data loss. Like, data loss is one of the things that's bad that could happen. But interruption is far worse. I consulted for one client, and when I was helping them with their cyber liability insurance, they actually weren't insuring themselves for data loss, because to them, they're like, yeah, that's bad, certainly. But for us, not being able to produce our product for an hour costs X dollars. And if we're down for 3 days, it costs us this much dollars. So their cyber liability insurance policy was focused on means of production and not data loss, which is, I think a lot of companies aren't quite there yet. But
it's sort of interesting, isn't it? How there was always this conflict between the security teams and the network teams around, well, we need to secure the systems. And the network team said, well, we need the systems to be up and need to be available. And now security is really looked at as how do we make sure that the systems stay up?
Yeah, it very much is that, right? Like, you forget, I think for the longest time, we've always said security is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, except for the most part, we've been focused on that confidentiality piece because the news has forced us to look at that. And now we're down at the A. We're like, okay, well, availability is tantamount now. In a digital world, we need to be able to reach our customers all the time, and anything that goes down is critical to that. And then, of course, integrity. We're a data-driven world, so that data has to be good in order for our business to work. So we really are owning those three major components of business operations now. We're not just keep bad guys out, guns, gates, and guards. That era has kind of gone.
Absolutely. And you talked about, this seat at the table and that this is usually symptomatic of the leader dealing with communications and leadership challenges of managing up. How do we do that effectively?
So there's a couple ways, I think, for CISOs first and foremost, which is finding your way into your key partnerships. So I always say we're kind of at the intersection of IT, audit, and law. For a long time, the security officer has been focused on the technology, and so they speak to their peers in tech, and they don't really value or have much respect for the audit and the law kind of components. And so learning to speak those risk languages also. When I was consulting, doing virtual CISO, a lot of times when I would see the CISOs that were floundering, it was because they got into the boardroom or the executive rooms and really talked heavy technology. And the more nervous or rattled by the questions they were getting from executives, the more they went down into that technology. And so then they weren't communicating anymore. And so then the board and management is getting frustrated and they're asking me, the outside person, do I have the right guy? Do I have the right person leading my security organization? So learning how to speak to the boardroom about critical technology issues without coming forward with your Chicken Little stuff, right? I mean, we also saw an era of CISOs, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And it's just, we're there to present the information that drives their business decisions. And anything that isn't that is not worthwhile in that room.
And who have you found to be those key stakeholders in the boardroom that you really need to be the ones to influence, to drive things forward?
Well, and I think I said in the book, Todd, a good friend of mine, Paul Lear, who used to run incident management, always said, if the CISO and the general counsel are meeting for the first time during an incident, we can add a comma to how much that breach is going to cost the company, right? So to me, that's a key partnership. And that's an external person, someone who runs incident response on the legal side, saying, this is a partnership that has to be built, a friendship, a camaraderie that has to happen, long before any kind of incident response activity takes place. So, I often say to folks, if you don't get to interview with the general counsel when you're looking to accept a new job, you should seek to have that conversation before you get there, because you want to know how does that person see security? How are we going to work together? Because in a data breach, the security risk ship has sailed. The technology risk ship sailed. The likelihood is 100% now because it's happened, right? So that risk isn't a thing. We're shifting our focus after that onto what are the legal and reputational risks. And that's what the GC is there for. And so if you haven't made those connections, that partnership, I have found at my last role at GSK, my legal partner, probably I spoke to her more frequently than any other stakeholder in the building. Important relationship.
I think that is spot on. I think back in my career and the places where I've been the most successful, I've always had a really strong relationship with the general counsel. I think they're the best advocate you can have in an organization. You talk about how the CISO is the one who has kind of the target on their back, pardon the pun, but yeah. Is that fall person. How do CISOs minimize that risk, I guess, of that happening in their organization?
Well, one, I think it goes without saying that we in our own community are the worst at this. I think we in the security community need to stop pointing fingers and shaming our peers whose companies have suffered an incident. And I'd love to say we don't do that anymore. But we absolutely, as a community, are quick to speak out about whatever happened at whatever company. And I think first and foremost, we collectively need to cut that out. It's just victim shaming. It's terrible. But in your own company, the way you're going to do that is through your governance program, because really at that point, you're saying, here's a risk. What are we going to do about it? And if the company is going to invest in mitigating controls so that risk doesn't happen. But if nothing else, everyone at the table understands this risk is real. We're doing something about it or we're not doing something about it. And at the business level, they're deciding to leave that risk go. Now, if you're the CISO and you're not communicating risk well, then yeah, you become the fall guy because you're the person who's supposed to be the expert at this topic. And you need to communicate to the business the likelihood that these things could happen, what the impact to the company is going to be, and what the opportunities to mitigate that are. But I think all too often in security, we're quick to go, oh, well, I told them and they didn't do anything about it. That's what the governance part is for, is making sure that everyone is hearing the message at the same time and we're making a record of those decisions.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, available at Amazon.com and other booksellers. And how do we, as we're managing this risk and we're dealing with our third-party suppliers, how do we make sure that our third-party suppliers that are that we're using, particularly when we're responding to an incident, that we have all the right players and that they're performing the roles that we're expecting them to perform?
Well, I think that's the $1 million question right now. I think that is one of the biggest questions for CISOs everywhere right now, because I can do every form of deep dive assessments. I can send surveys. I can hire third parties to go do on-site assessments, but we're never going to catch something like a SolarWinds, right? We're never going to find that in any kind of assessment that we do. So we have to really start looking at what are the other ways that we can protect ourselves from our third parties and still do business. I think this is, quickly becoming, one of the biggest critical issues. But I will also say, again, talking with our legal partners, is when I have seen third parties have security incidents, I've been hired to sit at the table and help communicate to their business partners, their clients, what is happening and what's going on. And most often I get a CISO on the other side who is demanding information. They want it now. They want it quickly. We know, you have to tell us, you're contractually obligated. And, again, this is where the CISO community comes in. I will be sitting on the other side of that table telling your third-party business partner not to tell you anything. And the reason why we're not telling you anything at the point at which we're communicating is we're letting you know we have a problem. But the depth of which we know of that problem, we don't know. And so any amount of communicating too soon doesn't help anyone. And I think oftentimes, like I said, we get the CISOs on the other side and they get so punchy and they get so aggressive and then they get talking really fast and technical. And it's like, we don't know what we don't know, and we're not going to sit here and guess with you because that introduces risk. So as a third party, you have to rely on whatever contractual language you have in place, recognizing that timelines, are kind of a waste. Don't even bother putting, you'll notify us in 24, 48, 72 hours in there, because we all know we can't get adequate information in that kind of time. Mm-hmm. Like, we can tell you something happened, the lights are blinking, but I've got a team of people working on figuring out what's going on, and calling up every third party isn't on my priority list. And I'm willing to take whatever we'll see you in court and deal whatever the contract says later. I'm trying to protect my company first and foremost, not adhere to some contract language. So look out for kind of those arbitrary timelines. But to the extent you can be open and honest with your third parties or your clients, depending on which side you sit on, about what's important to you and having honest dialogue about what's going on. Transparency is giving people enough information so that they can make a decision. It's not about giving them all the information that you know. And so CISOs have to be willing to accept what information is being provided and act accordingly. And on the other side, the third party side, they need to be prepared to give, as much information as they're able without, overstepping their knowledge.
So it's better to err on the side of waiting for the more accurate information and extending the timeline out.
Right. I mean, the whole reason we talk about Target is because they're known for having lost 30 million credit cards. But when Strauss Friedberg finished their investigation of Target, it turned out that less than 1% of those credit card numbers were actually exposed. So 30 million transactions were impacted. But because they came out so early with the information, all we all remember is 30 million, right? So it really is a good example that coming out with all of the information or guesses too soon really just creates more problem than it's worth. And I'm not suggesting that companies wait, months to disclose breaches. I'm just saying these 24, 42, 70, 48, 72 hour timelines are just plain silly. I think, we need to commit to moving quickly, demonstrate that we have an incident response plan, that it's tested frequently so that we can move quickly, bring in an expert third party, one for perspective, right? I think we can all say that we're a little bit biased about our programs and what we're good at, and perhaps a little less aware of what we're not great at. So bringing in an objective third party to do your incident response, these are all ways that you're going to show your partners, your customers, your shareholders that you are on the right side of doing the right thing. You're not hiding anything. You're just moving as quickly as you can with experts.
So you talk about muscle memory to help, move those things along faster when you actually have an incident. What are those types of things that organizations should do to make that good? Are tabletop exercises sufficient, or do we need to do something beyond that?
So I usually say there's two types of tabletop incidents. One is your technical incident response. That team, if I've seen errors in technical incident response, it's that their incident response guides are too heavy. They're thick, they go thunk on the table. And it's easy for someone on a technical team to make a mistake when the incident response plan is far too prescriptive. So building your incident response plans to allow certified incident handlers to do their thing is the most important kind of part of that. And then, regular incident response tabletop activities for the team, remembering also to switch out members of the team. Everybody knows that there's that one person on the team who's extraordinarily brilliant, technically brilliant. Well, what happens if they're not there? So you can't let every tabletop be run and solved by that one person, because then you have a critical failure come incident response time. The other is don't let your pen tests go to waste. Like let your incident responders be unaware so that when they see it, they can start figuring out what's happening, right? Making sure if they all know that you're having your pen test that day, they're going to see and shut off the alerts. So instead, force them to look and try to figure out what's going on. And then the other kind of tabletop is the executive level tabletop. Make sure that your communications leader or, PR, marketing, sales, business leaders are exposed to what's going to happen in a security incident. Everything from a third-party breach to ransomware, covering off all the kinds of scenarios, up to and including the CFO is on vacation in a safari in Africa, so that you can figure out where you might have organizational blocks that prevent you from responding. So, as an example, I had one company that had a policy and a limit to how much people were authorized to spend on certain services. And so during an actual incident, their CFO was unavailable, and therefore the funds were unavailable. And so doing those kinds of tabletops helps. The other thing is it helps for executives to understand what's happening or what's going to happen, so that in the actual moment, you're not having debates about whether or not you want to communicate to your clients, for example, of an incident. You've got the salesperson is like, I want to get out in front of this, and I want to get fast, and I want to do but it's not always the best move. And so if they're all used to and understand what the plan is before it actually happens, I think it makes it far easier on the day of. I will say that in almost every breach that I have worked on, which has been, probably 100, almost always the head of communications wants to say, we deeply regret that the security incident happened, and we apologize for the inconvenience. And they put all of this kind of soft language in there that implies they're at fault and they have done harm to their client. And you want to not have that kind of language in there. Because yes, we all wish this didn't happen, but we're victims of crime. And so I don't know, I feel like executives need to hear that over and over and over again. In the event of an attack, you're a victim of crime. And insider, theft, you're a victim of crime. Of course, there's the occasional, whoops, we didn't spend the money we should have spent, and now we're at a different kind of litigation risk management. But getting the communications person comfortable with what we're going to say before we have to say it. As I said to you earlier, breaches all kind of have the same fact pattern, which is bad guy gets credentials, bad guy escalates credentials, bad guy steals data, company is remorseful. So in effect, if you've done a tabletop at the executive level, you can write your narrative long before the incident happens and then just plug in the details later so that nobody's trying to craft a statement at the worst possible time.
That's excellent advice. Well, this has been very insightful, Dawn. There's just a lot of great advice in here for people that are needing to deal with an incident, and we know most organizations will be at some point, and it's best to be prepared. Do you have any other final advice that you'd like to give?
Sure. My last, I think, advice for CISOs is remember that you're the expert on this topic and that no one else is, because oftentimes I find, a CISO will refer to a finance partner, a legal partner, and blah, 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 as being really stupid. And the fact is, no one in your company, none of your users, none of your management are really stupid. They're just not experts at security. And if they were, we wouldn't need you. So keep in mind always, when you're talking to the person across the table, they aren't experts in cybersecurity and they're not meant to be. It is your job to communicate what they need to know to make business decisions. It's not your job to make them cybersecurity experts. So I think that's the nugget that I want all CISOs to take away.
Well, thanks very much, Dawn. Thanks for your contribution to the CISO Compass book, and thanks for helping all these organizations figure out how to do incident response.
Yeah, and it really is a whole lot less scary when we talk about it often. And I think, like I said, as a community, if we can kind of normalize a little bit what it looks like and treat each other all just a little bit kinder, I think that it will have a lasting impact in how we respond to incidents in the future.
Well, thanks for your time today.
You're welcome. It's so good to talk to you. I'm glad that you called.
Thank you.
Cybereason is the champion for today's defenders, providing an endpoint security platform to prevent, detect, and respond to malicious operations on computers, mobile devices, servers, and the cloud. Cybereason. End cyber attacks from endpoints to the enterprise to everywhere. Learn more at cybereason.com/CISO stories.